So moving to a new area can be super overwhelming. I mean, you've got to take into account things like what the best neighborhood is and where the best place is to live at and where the right area is to live and how are the schools. That in and of itself can be overwhelming. But that is just one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is what are the pros and cons of living in this city? The pros and cons are exactly what we're going to be covering today. In fact, this is actually one of my favorite videos to make, the pros and cons of living in Kansas City. So this is the second time that I've done this. It's kind of on an annual basis. This is my spring 2004 edition of all of the things that I love about Kansas City and some things that I don't love about it, or cons rather, but there will be 5 pros and 5 cons. I'm so excited to be sharing all of this stuff with you and getting you more familiar with the Kansas City area, and we're going to get to that right now. If we've never met before, my name is Anita Cordell and I make videos about Kansas City, where to eat, where to sleep, where to live, where to play, and all things Kansas City as well as our weather. I also help people just like you buy, invest, and relocate right here in our amazing city. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. My contact information is below, including a link to my calendar. It goes right to my schedule. You can set up a time that is convenient for you, and we will talk about real estate and any of your goals that you want to meet. So let's talk about Kansas City. If you're considering relocating here, you want to know just a few basic things about the geography of it. First of all, Kansas City is in 2 states. That's right. There are 2 Kansas cities. One is Kansas City, Missouri, and one is Kansas City, Kansas. Those are the inner city proper, per se, sides of both sides of the city. Part of our whole metropolitan area sits on the state line of Kansas and Missouri. Over the years, our city has expanded, and we have large amounts of suburbs going throughout both Kansas and Missouri. But I wanted to just let you know that when you're relocating here, you'll want to make sure that you understand that it is on 2 different states, one Kansas and one Missouri. Now, I'm going to share with you my top 5 things that people love about living here. Those are my top pros about living in Kansas City. So the first pro about living in Kansas City is our jobs. But before I start about talking about some of the employment opportunities here, I'm going to talk a little bit about the traffic, because you're going to want to know that detail when you're making that decision. So some people, when they move here, can have the opportunity of living in Kansas or Missouri, and then other people, when they move here, need to live within a certain mile radius of their employment. So you'll want to know that information first. Where are you getting your job, and where do you need to live state-wise? And so with that being said, I look at Kansas City kind of as a little miniature city. We aren't that big. Even though our population is about 2.3 million, it only takes about 45 minutes to get from one side of the city to the other. Most of the time, I tell people to allocate anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes to get to the airport. If you're living south Kansas City in some of the farther out suburbs, you're going to want to take 45 minutes to an hour to get to the airport. But overall, it takes 45 minutes to get from one side to the other. That's on all stretches, east to west, north to south. And so when you're looking at that, and just keep in mind your job, you want to know how far it is to your employment. Now, when it comes to actually looking for a spot, we have the opportunity as a real estate agent to look in our MLS, and we can put in an address and stretch that out so that, say you only want to live 5 minutes from your employment. Well, I can grab all of the houses that are around that area. But if you want to live 45 minutes away from your employment, I have that opportunity as well. So with that in mind, you have a lot of opportunities to live in multiple different areas of the city within a certain range. So I wanted to just share that as we're getting into the pro of this. Now, as far as job opportunities go, there is so many businesses here in Kansas City. A lot of times people move here just for the opportunities. Now, I wouldn't say that we are a Dallas and we're not necessarily, you know, Silicon Valley, but we do have a lot of opportunities. In fact, there's multiple companies that actually have their headquarters here in Kansas City. Just to name a few, there's American Century, Black & Veatch, Burns & McDonnell, Cerner, the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. There's Garmin International, H&R Block, Hallmark Cards, which in and of itself you would want to move here for Hallmark Cards, J.E. Dunn Construction, Vanguard Airlines. These are just to name a few. There's Sprint. So there's so many headquarters here that you just want to make sure that you keep your eyes open for these headquarters. So with all that being said, jobs are a very high pro when you are reconsidering or relocating into Kansas City. And in fact, one of our suburbs named Overland Park, Kansas, according to livability.com, Overland Park, Kansas, out of all of the cities in America, it was ranked as one of the top 10 places to live for families. And they do take into consideration jobs and affordability and all of that. Now, pro number 2 is all about food and culture and history. We are so rich in all three of these. In fact, let's just talk about barbecue. You knew that I was going to mention that, right? So barbecue, depending on who you ask, we are known as a world-class city for barbecue. In fact, many people rate us higher than Dallas. And also, we are number one in a lot of people's opinions of where to go to find great barbecue. Now, I will tell you this, we have contests here, we have a wealth of barbecue restaurants. There's just so much here when it comes to barbecue. You've got Jack Stack Barbecue, you've got Joe's, all kinds of original mom and pop barbecue shops that are out. And I'm telling you, when you move here, you're gonna get a favorite question, and that is, where's your favorite barbecue restaurant? So I'm telling you, food, culture, and history, you have to include all of our barbecue. Another really cool thing about our history is we are known for our fountains. We have over 200 registered fountains in the Kansas City metropolitan area. So that kind of goes with a lot of the vibe and the culture. A lot of times people will come here and visit, and they'll go on a fountain tour where you can drive around and look at all of the fountains. We are actually so incredibly rich in that culture, and so a lot of times people come here and are just amazed at how beautiful our city is. And then when it comes to history, we are also known for our World War I museum. We have the Nelson Atkins Museum, and of course we have Union Station. You can't come to Kansas City without going to Union Station. We also have the Arabia Steamboat Museum, where there was a family that actually found this steamboat in our Missouri River, lifted it up, and they've been cleaning it and finding all kinds of artifacts in there and just learning about our history through that. So it's another great thing to do. We have a lot of history when it comes to jazz. In fact, some of our school districts here will use jazz as part of their school curriculum. We have Count Basie, we have Mary Lou Williams. There is still even jazz bands that play down in some of the areas, the Jazz District. And speaking of history and famous people, you know that Walt Disney actually has roots here in Kansas City, right? And it's worth mentioning that the 33rd President of the United States also has his roots here in the Kansas City metropolitan area. So if you come to town, you've got to go to the Harry S. Truman Museum and Library. And then as far as culture is concerned, we have so much fantastic shopping here. You've got the Weston Crown Center, you've got Legends, you've got Town Center Plaza, you've got Oak Park Mall. There's so many places to shop here in Kansas City. Speaking of the plaza, if you're here for Thanksgiving, you'll want to go down to the Crown Center Plaza and just see all of the lights that get turned on Thanksgiving night. It is such an iconic thing for Kansas City. And so when it comes to like the pros of the culture and the jazz and the vibes, and just, you will love all of that. Pro number 3 is the fact that we have so much to do. Now, I know I've mentioned some of the culture and the fountains and going on tours and the museums and all that, but beyond that, there's so much to do here. In fact, one of the cities, Overland Park, Kansas, I mentioned before, it was ranked as the second happiest city in all of America. And one of the things that they did was they studied and found out that leisure time was one of the rankings in how they scored the cities. Overland Park is just one of the things to do here in our city. There's so much more to do. We are known for a slew of entertainment options here in the city. One of the things is our Kansas City Speedway. If you wanted to have more of an exciting adventure and more of a hyped atmosphere, that's really great. But then we also have really calm things. We've got relaxed atmospheres, like a lot of lakes here. We've got Loose Park down near Westport. You've got Shawnee Mission Park, which is on the western side of the Kansas City area. That park alone has a 120-acre lake. It's got 11 shelters. It's got a walking trail. It's got a horseback riding near there. You can rent out bikes and go bike riding on there. But then we also have activities that start in the summertime where you can go every Sunday in Overland Park and you can bring your family and you can listen to live music on a Sunday afternoon. You can have a picnic and whatever. But there's also a wealth of other information. We've got community centers, we've got theaters, we've got the symphony orchestra, we've got worlds of fun and oceans of fun, and a ton of other things when it comes to activities and entertainment. You know, a lot of times people tout on, oh my goodness, I want to go and live at a beach place or go and live in the mountains. And the thing that I love about Kansas City is you get a little bit of mixture of both. You get all of it all combined into one city. There's so much to do. We also are ranked as one of the top cities for soccer. There's just so many sports and so many family activities. You will never hear the word I'm bored if you really look and do your research on what you can do. There's all kinds of things to do. Speaking of Overland Park, as the second happiest city in America, the personal finance website called Wallet Hub compared 182 of the largest cities, including 150 most populated U.S. cities, plus at least 2 of the most popular cities in every single state. And what they did was they compared them to 3 factors: emotional and physical well-being, income and employment, and community and environment. And within those 3 factors, they studied 29 indicators of happiness and came out with Overland Park being the number 2 of all the cities in America that they studied. Now, it's interesting too when it comes to activities and entertainment, and people get concerned about the weather here. And I will tell you this, that when it comes to outdoor activity, we have 215 sunny days in Kansas City. On average, we get to see all 4 seasons, which is wonderful. And really, when you're looking at the big grand scheme of things, we have an average of maybe about 28 inches of snow every year. There's some winters that we don't have any snow at all, and then there's other winters that we might have a little bit more, but there wasn't that many days of snow this last year. So when people think of, oh my goodness, our winters are so bad, that is just not true. It does get cold. We're talking about in the 20s and 30s. It can get that cold, sometimes a little bit colder, but it doesn't last for, 6 months out of the year. It's just not that way. And so when it comes to like activities and entertainment, you won't have to worry so much about the weather. And if it does snow, in a couple of days, it's gone. Okay, the number 4 pro is all about our sports. We love our sports teams. Of course, you've heard of Chiefs. Of course, you've heard of Royals. We've also got Sporting KC. And most recently, we've got our first women's soccer facility for the Kansas City Current, which is our women's soccer team. We also, like I mentioned before, have the Kansas Speedway. So if you're loving racing and all of that, it's the first NASCAR track in the Midwest, and it's located in the Kansas side. So in Kansas City, Kansas, Missouri, there's a lot of sports, but then this has the Kansas City, Kansas side of it. We also have the T-Bones. We also have the Comets, which is the Kansas City's indoor soccer team. And we also have the Mavericks hockey team. And not only that, but we have the Kansas City Roller Warriors. They are actually the KC's premier all-female roller derby team. I'm telling you what, the spirit of our fans in Kansas City is so magnetic, it's so electric, it's so contagious, really. You will want to experience one of these games at one point or another. That is all I have to say about that. Now, before I get to my 5th one, I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to post in the comments. So I'm inviting you to post in the comments and tell me what your favorite things are about living here in Kansas City. The fifth pro about living in Kansas City is our real estate and investing. One of the things that I constantly get told when people come into town and they look at homes is they can't believe how much they can get for the same price from where they're coming from. We look at properties and like where they're coming from, you might not have a basement, or where they're coming from, there might not be an added bathroom. But the reality of it is, people are constantly amazed at how affordable our pricing is on our real estate. Most properties have a basement, and the average sales price in the Kansas City metropolitan area is about $420,000. Now, I do cover about 6 counties in the Kansas City metropolitan area, so I'm pulling all of those numbers into the whole area, but you have plenty of options to get something lower or something higher depending on what your needs are. The other thing about real estate is that we have all kinds of different variety. Whether it's single family homes, we have townhomes, we have condominiums, we have lake properties, we have 55 plus active adult communities. We have properties that you can invest in, like duplexes. The thing that I want people to understand about Kansas City is there's no limit to what you can get. And if you want to go commercially, you can get an apartment complex or what have you. There's a lot of opportunities when it comes to real estate. There's so many options when it comes to real estate, and that is definitely a pro. In fact, I have people calling me a lot from California and from other states because they hear about how affordable their price is. So they're starting to actually buy a second home here, or they'll move their kids here for college. They'll go ahead and buy a home instead of having them rent an apartment. It's just amazing how affordable our properties are here in the Kansas City metropolitan area. And what is also so cool about this is that when you live on a lake property, you feel like you're actually in a resort. When you live in an adult active community, you feel like you have the community. So our city is so diverse and so amazing that you can actually find something that you are looking for. Even though we might not necessarily be by a beach, you can actually live like a resort. The other thing I want to talk about real estate is we have a lot of HOAs. HOA is a homeowners association. If you're an investor looking to potentially buy a property for a rental or whatever, you can easily get a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home that's split level for under $350,000. Now, what you'll want to do is to make sure that your HOA that you're buying into is going to allow for the investing that you are wanting to do. Now that you have heard some of my favorite things about living in Kansas City, it's only fair for us to talk about the cons. Con number 1 is the weather. Now, you're probably going, Anita, I thought that you talked positively about the weather, and now it's a con. How is that? There's a popular saying that is going around in the Kansas City area where people will say, if you don't like the weather in Missouri, wait 15 minutes, it's going to change. And that is almost true. There are days, especially when the seasons change from spring to fall, or if you're in spring or you're in fall, you can go a day with a 30-degree variance. You can wake up in the morning, it'd be really chilly, and then all of a sudden it gets 30 degrees warmer. That's pretty common in the spring and in the fall. Now, when it comes to the summertime, it can be really hot and get really sticky, and then in the wintertime, it can get snowy some of the time. So when I say that it's a con, I'm just giving you the perspective of we do get all 4 seasons. It does get hot and sticky in the summer. It does have snow, but the reality of it is it's not that bad. In fact, I've lived here for most of my life, and the wintertime is not unbearable, and I wouldn't say that I would just up and move my family because it snows. Now let's talk about tornadoes. Yes, we do get tornadoes. We get them on the Kansas side as well as the Missouri side, but honestly, people come here and they ask how many tornadoes I've seen. To be honest with you, I have not experienced living in or through a tornado. Now, have I had to go down into my basement because the tornado alarms are going off into the city and it's horrible outside and there's tornadoes, that have dropped down 30 miles away? Yes, that has happened. But I have never seen a tornado. I have had a friend who's lost a house way out in Joplin, Missouri, and I have had destruction, or I've seen destruction in our city of Kansas City. And so I've had several people actually be affected by tornadoes, but I've never seen one live, and I've never had my property destroyed by a tornado. There are like these wind bursts that come through during the bad parts of the storms. There are several wind bursts that have come through my yard and actually have just wiped out, taken several of my trees. Gone. So when it comes to weather, you can look at it, it's all a matter of perspective. Our weather is not that bad. The cool thing is that we can enjoy so much here in Kansas City. In fact, in the wintertime, we even have a snow skiing place where you can go and actually snow. They've got man-made snow. It's outside. And so, of course, if it gets cold enough, it will work. But for the most part, yes, the weather is a con because it's so diverse and there can be tornadoes, but personally, I've never seen one. Con number 2 is our income tax in the city of Kansas City, Missouri. It's very strange and I don't understand why, but it's just the way that our system is set in place. So if you are a self-employed person or if you have your own business and you do business in the Kansas City, Missouri proper, you not only owe the state of Missouri income tax, but you also owe the city of Kansas City, Missouri income tax. I am not necessarily saying that you shouldn't live in Kansas City, Missouri or do business in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm not saying that. I am just saying that if you are an entrepreneur or you are wanting to open up your business in Kansas City, Missouri, this is something that you probably should know about. Con number 3, when it comes to living in Kansas City, is the transportation. For the most part, regardless of where you live, you're going to need your own transportation. You're going to need your own car. Now, that is not saying that if you live downtown in the downtown Kansas City, Missouri area, there is the Ride KC, and so you can ride a bus, especially if you live and work really, really close to all of that together. You can ride the bus. But for the most part, getting anywhere in the city, you're going to need transportation. And speaking of transportation, there's a lot of places that are not on the bus route, and so you'll want to take that into consideration too. Like if you don't have a car and your apartment building is not near, a bus route, you might not even be able to ride your bike. It might not even be close enough for that. So just wanting you to be aware of transportation. It is a little bit of a challenge. We're still working on that. You definitely want your own car. So this is a really weird con. There's this perception, because we live on the state line, there's this really weird perception that Missouri people are a certain way and Kansas people are a certain way. I mean, I've had clients who they will say, Anita, I will never buy a house in Missouri. And then there's Missourians that will say, I will never buy a house in Kansas. It's the weirdest thing. I don't understand it. I've lived on both sides of the state line. There is a little bit of a difference, but it just is dependent on your neighborhood. I've talked about this in other videos. I understand that if you need to move across the state line, it's just a different culture. It's a different vibe. It's just a weird perception. I view it as a con because I don't like to see people different, but there is a little bit of a reality when it comes to that. And number 5, the con is real estate and investing. Okay, so how can that one, just like the weather, be a pro and a con? Well, here's the thing that you'll want to know. If you are an investor and you are solely working to build up your portfolio, you'll want to make sure that you read the rules of the city. There are some suburbs that have no rules at all when it comes to Airbnb or rentals or anything. They don't monitor them. They could care less, which is fantastic. But then there's other cities in our Kansas City metropolitan area, including Kansas City, Missouri, that has put restrictions on investors coming into the city and buying properties for specifically short-term rentals or investment properties. And there's an ongoing battle as to whether or not they want it, whether they'll allow it, whether they'll not. And I have my own opinions about that. And it's just one of those things where it's viewed as a con depending on the city that you are buying in. So you'll want to make sure that you read the rules. You'll want to make sure that you get familiar with the city restrictions, the government policies, and make sure that you know where you are wanting to buy that's good for your portfolio and where you don't want to buy that might inhibit your portfolio. So that in and of itself a con. I'm going to throw this in as a bonus. I'm not going to call it a pro or a con, but I'm just going to be, honest with you guys. I get so many questions when it comes to crime and is a place safe. So I want to just be honest. I hold a real estate license and I cannot legally tell you as a person out there in the public what area is safe and what area is not safe. I know it's horrible. You guys want to be informed. You want to know what's going on in the public domain. But I can only tell you from my experience, but I can't tell you because that's called steering. And so as a licensed real estate agent, I cannot tell you if one area is safe or not because our perception is different. In fact, I've done a whole entire video of the 5 questions that a real estate agent cannot answer because we have to protect certain classes of people. And if we answer some questions, we can't protect them. But what I can do is share with you some resources on where you can go. There's some government websites like kansascity.gov. There's also websites like niche.com, there's greatschools.org. There's this public information that you can go to and find out whether or not the ratings of those areas are aligned up with what you feel is comfortable. Now, I want to say I love living in Kansas City. I've lived on both the Kansas side and the Missouri side. One of the places that I've lived in Missouri is in the heart of Kansas City, Missouri. And when I lived there, I felt safe. I didn't feel uncomfortable. So you know a history of me. I lived, when I was in grade school, I lived in Denver, Colorado, in the heart of Denver. And we lived there for about a year, and I didn't feel uncomfortable necessarily with that area. I've been around crime and I've been around areas that someone might not necessarily feel as comfortable with, but I don't feel unsafe in Kansas City. Now, there are certain areas that I don't poke my nose around and I know that I don't belong, so I stay away from certain areas, but for the most part, I don't feel unsafe. And I hope that you can find some resources to where you are looking, where you would find information that would help you determine whether or not a certain area is safe for your family or not. We also have to understand that Kansas City has 2.3 million people, and there's going to be people who don't do the right thing. So keeping that all into perspective, I just wanted to share with you some of my experience and some valuable insights and websites to go to that will help you make your decision. I hope you get some tremendous value out of this. I love doing the pros and cons about Kansas City. Be sure and hit that subscribe button and be sure and give this a thumbs up, and also too, I invite you to put any comments below that you want. In fact, if there's an area in town that you would like to have me do a video on, be sure and comment on it, and I will certainly take that into consideration with my next video. Also too, I know that when I was making decisions about real estate years and years ago, there was not any YouTube channels out at all that I could just click on or find information out or find out pros and cons or anything. There wasn't any of that. So I hope that this channel is helpful, and be sure, again, look in the descriptions below for my contact information. There is that calendar link. It goes right to my schedule. You can schedule a time and we can talk about your real estate goals. If you have any questions at all, I would love to talk to you. Thanks for watching, and go out and live that Kansas City life.